everyone. This is Mrs. Malloy, and this is lecture number 5, the Russian Empire. So, we've learned all about the remainder of the eastern portion of the Roman Empire, which became known as, eventually, the Byzantine Empire. Under leaders like Justinian, it expanded its borders and reclaimed territory. The Roman Catholic Church was split into two, with the creation of the Orthodox Christian Church, also called the Eastern Orthodox Church. So by the time of the Byzantine Empire, the Roman Catholic Church was split into two with the creation of Orthodox Christianity. We also know that from our last lecture that one of the biggest ethnic groups living in what became known as Russia were the Slavs, most of whom converted to Orthodox Christianity under Orthodox saints Methodius and Cyril. We also learned that Saint Cyril and Methodius wrote down the Slavic language in an alphabet that became known as the Cyrillic alphabet, which is still used today by the Russian and Serbian peoples. Well, this religious conversion of the Slavs, along with the trade they conducted with the Byzantine Empire, is going to lead to a blending of Slavic and Greek cultures, forming the basis for Russian culture. Early Russia was a pretty big place, nowhere near the size of today's Russian nation, but fairly geographically diverse all the same, with a variety of ethnic groups living in its territory. One of the dominant groups were the Varangians, who were also called by a shorter name, Rus. So the name Russia comes from the word Rus, R-U-S. These Rus, or Varangians, most likely had their origins in the Viking people. According to legend, the Viking king Rurik, spelled R-U-R-I-K, Rurik, founded a city at Novgorod, spelled N-O-V-G-O-R-V-A-D. Novgorod. See, I cannot speak Russian. Which eventually is going to become one of Russia's first major cities. Another city was Kiev, located in what is now Ukraine, located on the Dnieper. That's spelled D-N-I-E-P-E-R, but it's pronounced Dnieper River. The Vikings were able to sail down three major rivers, including the Dnieper, which connected them to the Black Sea and eventually to Constantinople in the Byzantine Empire. The Vikings ended up intermarrying with Slavic people who lived in the area, and soon they were simply called the Slavs. Some early Slavic princes led various Slavic territories or principalities, meaning an area of land led by a prince or princess, and they converted eventually to Orthodox Christianity. This included a famous princess named Olga in the year 957 AD. Princess Olga's son later became the ruler, but resisted Christianity. It was Princess Olga's grandson, called Vladimir, who converted to Orthodox Christianity and then had all of his subjects convert as well. Soon there was a very close connection between Constantinople, the capital of the Byzantine Empire, and early Russia. The city of Kiev soon grew to be a prosperous and cosmopolitan city. Kiev is therefore considered to be one of the earliest Russian cities. In 1019, Vladimir's son, Yaroslav the Wise, took power. He made alliances in Western Europe by marrying off his daughters to the leaders there. He also expanded trade. Kiev fell apart when Yaroslav died, in part due to the division of Kiev to his sons, who subsequently began fighting with one another over the territory. Add to that a series of religious wars called the Crusades, beginning in 1095 AD, and the Kievan kingdom fell apart. Then, around 1200 AD, a group of warriors from the east called the Mongols took over what had been Russia, including Kiev.
Wait for it! The Mongols!
The Mongols were horsemen from Central Asia who were nomads. You learned briefly about them as ninth graders last year in your studies on China. Skilled horsemen who invented the stirrup, which allowed the Mongols to steadily shoot arrows while standing up while riding their horses, these horsemen were able to conquer much of the world. The leather stirrups are not unlike the pedal foot pad you have on a bike, allowing you to stand up on the pedal while riding forward. The stirrup is one of those inventions in history that is credited with allowing the Mongols to easily conquer their enemies. Perhaps the most well-known of these Mongols was Genghis Khan. The Mongols were fierce, ruthless, and a veritable military machine. However, their leadership skills left much to be desired once they'd savagely taken over a given area. It was for this reason that they usually allowed local leaders to stay in power once they had been conquered. The leaders were then required to give the Mongols a huge payment of gold or other valuables called a tribute. Basically, the idea was, pay us this money and then we won't kill you and we'll leave you alone. The Khan Mongols were called the Golden Horde, named after the yellow or gold-colored yurts or tents that they erected wherever they settled or camped. The word horde actually means camp, and their royal color was gold. The Mongols took over what had been the Kievan Russian kingdom in this manner around 1240. This area became known as the Khanate of the Golden Horde. It was in this manner that the Mongols controlled Russian territory for over 200 years. The Mongols allowed the Russians to maintain their Orthodox Christian traditions as long as the people obeyed. Because resisting the Mongols was pretty much feudal, the Russians agreed to this way of life and made massive tribute to them. A famous Russian military leader and hero named Alexander Nevsky encouraged other Russian leaders to cooperate with the Mongols for their survival. One of the negative effects the Mongols had on Russia, besides the tribute payment and, basically holding the people hostage, is that they really isolated them from the rest of the world. It was for this reason that they didn't make some of the advances in technology that were developing in places like Constantinople. But in a city called Moscow, various Russian leaders eventually emerged to challenge the Mongols for power. Some of these leaders had helped the Mongols initially to gain territory by lending them their armies and then helped the Mongols put down several Russian revolts. The Mongols appreciated this and left them alone to show their thanks. One of these Russian leaders who helped the Mongols was a guy named Ivan I. The Mongols put him in charge of collecting the tribute payments for them across Russia in the 1320s. He soon became known as Ivan Moneybag. Ivan had an important Orthodox bishop who was very powerful in the Eastern Church. He had this guy move to Moscow. This gave him religious as well as political power. His descendants continued to gain territory around Moscow, bit by bit, therefore expanding their power. In the mid to late 1400s, a leader named Ivan III emerged as the new leader. He ruled the Russian territory for 43 years, and he made a final break with the Mongols by refusing to pay them their tribute. He began calling himself Tsar. That's spelled C-Z-A-R. Tsar can actually be spelled as Tsar, C-Z-A-R, or you might see it spelled T-S-A-R. You can spell it both ways, but it's pronounced the same way either way. It's a Russian word that means, you guessed it, Caesar. He began calling his Russian territory the Third Rome. So where would the second Rome have been? That's right, Constantinople. Good job. Anyway, the final Russian break from the Mongols occurred in 1480. This was officially not much of a battle. The Russians and the Mongols sort of just glared at each other from across a river. It was a huge stalemate, but enough that the Mongols said, whatever, this totally isn't worth our time and effort, yo. Right, and so both parties went home. So this bloodless event is basically regarded as Russian liberation from the Mongols. So it was from here that the Russian Empire was born, and we'll continue talking about the Russian Empire later. So when the Mongols retreated from Russia, I guess there were other groups of people who were also resisting the Mongols in other places. Yes, there were people living in Central Asia who were resisting the Mongols around the same time, and these people were known as the Turks. And so I'm going to talk about them in my next lecture. Thanks for listening. Bye.
Расцветали яблони и груши,